How am I? It's your girl, the Sassy Engineer. If you're new here, thanks for joining. In this video, I'll be sharing with you how I select and find journals for my research publications. I know that finding journals can be very tedious and to some people even frightening, and there's so many options to choose from. So how do you select the right journal for you? Should you go for paid journals? Should you go for unpaid journals? Speaking of paid and unpaid journals, paid journals are the ones that you pay money to publish your research paper, while unpaid journals are the ones that you don't necessarily need to pay money, except you are going for open access. Then you have to pay money for that one. Paid journals they have a wider reach, they're easier to publish with, but the issue is that they have more low quality research, because paid journals are really into the business of publication. So some of them don't really care whatever quality of work you send them, so far as you pay them, and that's it. From my experience, from $200 upwards. And if you're very good at negotiating, you can even negotiate. Is that bad? I'm not saying that there are no good ones out there. There are good ones out there, but generally, since they're into the business of publication, most of their papers are not peer reviewed, and then you have that a lot of predatory journals fall under this category. Now, for the unpaid ones, they are not easier to publish with as the paid ones, but their quality of research is much better because of peer-to-peer review. And you have that the access is not as open as you have in the unpaid journals. In order to access it, you need to have subscription. So maybe your own subscription, or your university or institute will need to have subscription. So that's where the challenge is. And that's why most people are really going for open access now, so that their research can reach a wider number of people. So that's the key difference between paid and unpaid journals. And as an author, you need to know how to select a journal for you to publish your research paper with, because you don't want to send your high quality work to a terrible or predatory journal. And that is why you should watch this video to the very end. And at this point, I'd like to say, if you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe button to join the community, as well as to motivate me to make more of these videos. So how do you find a journal? I'll say go online and search. There are different ways you can do this online. The best bet is to go to Google Scholar, put in the keywords, and you get your result. Then you take the journal names one at a time. But this is very tedious and time consuming. And because of that, journal publishers have developed journal finding tools. And this is a list of the common ones we have here. Now, how do you find these journal tools, you may be asking? Again, online. Go online and search Journal Finder, and you have a list of journal finders. You take whichever one you want. Now that you've found some journals, how do you select the ones to publish with? Again, there are so many factors that will help you to make that decision, and the preference will vary per person and per subject area. From my experience as an author and a reviewer, I'll be talking about some factors I think that are very crucial in helping you to make that decision. The very first one is the scope. I'm going to use an example from a journal that I published with. It's called Industrial Crop and Product. By just looking at the name, crop and product, you think, my material is in an industrial crop or an industrial product. Bam, you just submit. Just by looking at the title, you've made the decision and you submitted. Two things are involved when you do that. One, the editor will reject your manuscript without even looking, or they'll ask you to remove a section, and that section may be the whole chunk of your work. So you don't want that. It's always good to read the scope. The aims and the scope don't need explanation, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to briefly explain. The aim of the journal is the journal's purpose. What are they trying to accomplish? And the scope of the journal tells you how they intend to accomplish their aims. So taking this industrial crop and products, for example, if you look at their scope, you'll see that they take industrial crops, but they have specified that it has to be non-food and non-feed. So yes, your material is an industrial crop. So yes, your material is an industrial crop or an industrial product, but the application has to be non-food and non-feed, and they have stated that explicitly. So if you hadn't read the scope of this journal and you just rushed and submit there, you have a high chance of getting rejected. That's why it's always good to read the scope of the journal. And this particular one also asks that not only do you read the scope, you have to write a cover letter to tell them how your manuscript fits the scope of that their journal. Because I think this is helpful, because there are some journals that are sitting on the fence that are neither here nor there. So sometimes writing a cover letter to explain how that manuscript fits their scope is quite good. And these journals don't spare any expense. They always detail their scope so that you will not come back and say, I did not know. So make sure that you read the scope of the journal properly, the aims and the scope. This is the very first thing you should look out for in a journal before you even start looking at other things. The next factor that you should look out for is the almighty impact factor. This impact factor has a lot of controversies around it, but we're not going to talk about the controversy right now. A journal impact factor is a frequency with which an average article in that journal is cited in a year, and this is calculated over the last 2 years. It's calculated by Clarivate. Clarivate are the owners of Web of Science or Web of Knowledge, as some of you may know it. Now, some people don't like this impact factor, mainly because some journals encourage, or some even slightly enforce, self-citation. So that's where the controversy is anyway. But anyway, the higher the impact factor, the more important that journal is, but also the more difficult it is to publish with that journal, because these journals with high impact factors are given some level of importance and prestige in their subject area. So that's why the higher it is, the more difficult it is to publish with. But the higher the impact factor, the better. Impact factor vary per subject area. So an impact factor of, let me say, 3.78 can be very low for one subject area, but very high for another subject area. So that's why you shouldn't let impact factor alone stop you from selecting a journal, but it's something that you should keep in mind. Another metric you should look out for is the journal ranking. This one is done by SJR, and it tells you the impact of the journal. So how much scientific influence is that journal in a subject area? So the journal ranking is by subject area. How they do it is that they measure the number of citations that is received by that journals, and the importance or the prestige of the journals where these citations come from. So it's not just limited to journals, it's also to the journals that cite these journals, and it's by subject area. So it's divided into quartiles. You have Q1 up to Q4, and Q1 is the best, the highest ranking journals. So when you hear Q1 journal, Q2 journals, etc., we're talking about journal rankings. Another metric you should look out for is the speed and acceptance of a journal. I like to call this time to publication. It's divided into 3. You have time to first decision, then review time, and then publication time. Time to first decision is the time it takes, the average time it takes from when you submit your manuscript to when the first decision is made. Then the review time is the average time from when you submit your manuscript to when the first decision is made post-review. What this means is that after you have submitted your manuscript, they'll get back to you with a decision that maybe you have to revise your manuscript, or we can only accept your manuscript if you make this major revision. Now, if you agree to make the decision, then you make the decision, revise it, and resubmit. They'll also get back to you. And in some cases, it's always like, okay, we will accept this. In other cases, they're like, Nah, you're not going to take this. Look for somewhere else to publish it. So this is the decision, the post-review decision. So that time, the average time from the very first time you submitted your manuscript to that time is the review time. Then the publication time is the average time it takes from manuscript acceptance to when it first appears online. So when they publish it online. This one is usually short for many journals. So this is the time to publications, and you need to look out for this time because some journals take very long time, and it's always important, especially when you have IP comes into play. So you would want to be the first one to publish on that topic. Then the time to publication is important to look out for. Now, the time to publication, all of this tells you how fast a journal is in accepting, revising, and publishing your manuscript. But you have to know that you also play a role in this time. Don't blame it completely on the editorial board or the reviewers who are doing free service. You also play a role because when they get back to you, you have to make sure that you respond quickly. I mean, how fast you respond also contributes to the average time. So this is just an average in value. It can be faster, it can be slower. In my case, I have I have an article that took me more than 11 months to publish. More than 11 months. I went back to check the time to publication. The sum of everything was about, I would say, 11 weeks. But it took me more than 11 months to publish. I actually smelled a rat in that case. I think something fishy went on. But anyway, that article is my most cited article so far. So I guess it paid off in the end. Beside the time to publication, something else you should have in mind is the acceptance rate. Acceptance rate is a percentage of articles submitted in a year that has been accepted within that year. I've seen a lot of articles, a lot of journals with low percentage of acceptance, 16%. I don't know, I don't really value that. I don't really understand why. I don't really like journals that have low percentage acceptance rate. I just feel like, why? But then again, when you look at it, it's calculated per annum. So how many journals were submitted in a year and how many of these journals were accepted in that year? Because sometimes you may submit a journal in September and it gets accepted in January. I guess that doesn't count because they're like January to January. Anyway, I don't know. But I just don't usually like it when I see journals with low acceptance rates. I'm like, oh, what do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Anyway, I better go get my own journal then. Okay, let us be serious. These percentage acceptance rates don't include withdrawn articles anyway. There are other metrics that you can look out for. You have the site score, you have H index. Is also what they call agent factor. But if you ask me, I'll say that unless you are doing journal analytics, then these factors that I mentioned are sufficient. I wouldn't really go into all those details except you are doing some data analysis, or sorry, journal analytics, then it's fine. You can look at all those ones. And the very last one, and this is also an important thing you should look out for in a journal, is the guidelines. Make sure you read the journal guidelines. I always emphasize this to people. Always read the journal guidelines. The guidelines are a set of instructions that these journals give to authors. They tell you the types of papers the journals accept, things you should consider before you even think of submitting to that journal, how you should prepare your journal, the format, submissions for new submissions. If you are submitting a revised manuscript, the things you should look out for, the format, the ethics, their editing services, author services, and many other things that you have to consider, keep in the back of your mind while you're preparing your manuscript to submit to this journal. So journal guidelines to me are like exams instructions. When you go into an exam hall, you're expected to read the instructions and follow all the instructions. This is how journal guidelines are. They're like the terms and conditions of a journal. In this case, you must read them. It's not like your terms and conditions that you just scroll to the end and agree. You have to read everything. Because if you don't read these journal guidelines, then you have a high chance of facing rejection. Elsevier has similarities in many of their journal guidelines, especially when it comes to the ethics and authorship, co-authorship, conflict of interest declarations, editing services, author services, and all that. But then when it comes to the journal formatting and the types of journals that the types of papers that journal accept, that's where I've noticed differences. And I think this will apply to Springer journals, Taylor and Francis journals, and many other journal publishers that exist. So these are the 5 things that I feel are key that will help you in selecting a journal. And these are the 5 things that I always look out for when I am trying to select a journal to publish my research paper. Again, you have the scope, the aims and scope of that journal, the impact factor, the journal ranking, the speed and acceptance rate of that journal, and then you have the journal guidelines. What I would advise you to do is you can create a spreadsheet and create a heading and fill up all these journals. Then you filter it based on whatever you prefer at the time you're selecting your journal to make your to publish your research paper. I hope all these tips help you in selecting your journal to publish your research paper. If you have any other extra tips that you use to select your journals, let me know in the comment section. Feel free to share it for others to learn. We learn every day, you know. In the meantime, I have made a video for how you can read quickly. Make sure you have a look, and I'm going to make a video on how giving you step-by-step approach to preparing your research paper and submitting it. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Again, click the subscribe button. Also, click the bell button to turn on notification. Don't forget to like this video, comment, share your tips for others to learn, and also share the videos with your friends. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.